Hello, I'm Jay, owner of Volunteer Audio in Oliver Springs, Tennessee. We've got the latest Rockford Fosgate PMX-14 HD, and we're going to do a comparison between the Soundstream Reserve HDHU14 Plus, the HDHU14SI, and this new radio. We hope to be very informative, go over all the features, the pricing, and help you make the right decision in your purchase for your next radio for your Harley Davidson. All right, so we're going to try to do a side-by-side comparison in features and maybe even price per feature between these three radios. This is going to be a little difficult because none of these three radios have the exact same feature set. So pay attention as we go along because a lot of this information is going to help you make the right decision. Now, I want to talk about why we would replace our stock radio. A lot of people are looking at these because they're trying to get away from all the limitations the stock Harley radio has. Having to go back to the dealer to flash it to change out an amplifier. Having to use the Harley Davidson WIM to be able to do a headset. Having to buy all these parts to make things work. Sirius XM, for instance, is over $400 to add the module to add it to the stock radio, where with an aftermarket radio, it's $40, $45 worth of parts. So Harley's got you locked in and you don't want to go back there. The other reason, we want to add features we didn't have with our stock radio. So let's start with those major feature sets, the things we want that and why we would be replacing, and see if these radios answer that. So first off, if you had the old GT radio, you know, the rubber buttons on the side, or the 4.3 boom radio, you find out your Bluetooth is terrible and it takes forever to load and connect as you're taking off riding. Now, I will tell you, all three of these models, the HDHU14 Plus, the PMX-14 HD, and the HDHU14SI, have excellent Bluetooth. They're running the latest Bluetooth technology. They connect very, very quickly, and the sound from that is great. So a huge improvement over that factory GT radio. They also, compared to the GTS, are going to load faster and have better Bluetooth also. Now let's talk about the next big options. We know phone connectivity is huge. So let's talk about Apple CarPlay. If you had that factory GTS radio, you've got Apple CarPlay, but unless you unlock it with a techno research tool or have a headset connected, it doesn't work. All three of these radios are going to have Apple CarPlay, and there's a little difference between them. We'll get into that. But all three models have Apple CarPlay as well. That boots and works very well. We've tested it in all three models, and it works great. Now, both the 14 Plus and the 14SI from Soundstream are going to connect to your factory USB cable. That's where you're going to plug in your phone to get your Apple CarPlay to work. Now, we recommend a high-quality automotive-grade cable, and when you do that, they work excellent. Now, the Rockford radio is a little different in the sense that it comes with a new USB that you run into your glove box or storage box to plug your phone into. The 14SI, 14 Plus use the stock USB, which I actually prefer, and I want to point this out, because it's using an external part that simply plugs into the back of the radio. Let me show you this. Just plugs in right here on the back on either one of these. That means if that cable ever breaks, if it ever wears out, if you ever have a problem with it, you can buy a replacement cable and exchange it. Rockford built theirs into the back of the radio. That means if you cut this cable, if you mess up this end, if just use over time wears this out, you need another radio. You can't simply replace the cable. We love longevity. We love things built where they're easily repaired, and both of these are going to excel there when it comes to the USB input. Now let's move on to the next thing. Android Auto. So about 40% of our customers have Android phones. They would love to have Android Auto, so now we have our Google Maps and we have Waze right on screen. The factory GTS radio had that. The Boom 4.3 or the Boom 6.5 did not. All right, so the 14 Plus and the 14SI both have Android Auto when you connect your USB-C cable to that factory USB port. Rockford did not put Android Auto in the radio. So this is a huge thing between the two that you need to know, or between the three, because if you have an Android phone, you cannot display your maps on this radio. They're Apple only in that case, and I think that's a huge negative toward it, especially at its price point, but we'll get to pricing later as we go over these features. So Android users, one of these two are going to be necessary for Android Auto. Now, the next big thing in all these radios, we're trying to get better sound. We wanted our phone connected. We just went over doing that. They're all wired connection. They're all through USB. with this one not doing Android. So we want it to sound better. We're going to do that with better sound control. The stock radio has bass and treble adjustment, and it's extremely minimal. There's not enough adjustment there to really take the treble down if you're listening to, say, classic rock or 80s rock that is too bright, and it doesn't have enough bass adjustment there to really make any difference on bass either on the stock radio. We were super excited when the 14 Plus came out. It came out originally with a 10-band EQ, and through a later software update became a 13-band equalizer. So both the 14SI and the 14 Plus have a 13-band EQ. The Rockford radio came out with a 14-band equalizer. So they had to one-up them and add one more band. Now stay tuned to the end of the video. I'm going to show you that EQ in action in a bike, and we're even going to hook an RTA up and show you how it's working. Because even though on paper it sounds good to have 14 bands, we found in our testing that both the 14 Plus and the 14SI, they have 12 dB that you can increase each band, 12 dB you can take them down, and that gives us 24 decibel of adjustment. The Rockford limits you to 3 decibel up and 3 decibel down, so only 6 dB. That may not make any sense to you right now, but continue to watch. I'll show you on an RTA graph why it's important that we have that much adjustment, because there are some things boosted and missing in this radio that I could not fix with our EQ. Even with 14 bands, we didn't have enough adjustment. All 3 radios have high-pass filters and low-pass filters in the radio that are adjustable. Now, I will tell you, if you'll stay tuned to that RTA scene, you'll see we tested those high-pass and low-pass filters, and we did not see that they were very accurate. I'll go into more of that later in the video. I just don't want you to just take my word for it. Watch it at the end. We'll go over why we're saying the things we are now. I want to be completely honest and truthful in this video, and I want to give you an honest review. So watch toward the end. We'll go over those high-pass filters. So 13-band EQs on each of the outside models from Soundstream, 14 on the Rockford radio, but not as much adjustability on each one of those bands. We also have a subsonic filter on our subwoofer output on both Soundstream radios that's missing in the Rockford radio. Rockford's going to give you sub control up and down just like these two do. It's going to give you a low pass filter on the subwoofer output, but no subsonic filter to block the super low bass notes that we know your mid bass and even your 10-inch subs in your bags can't play. So I think that's missing. I think it would be necessary, and it's not in the radio. Let's move on. I touched on it momentarily. The USBs, I think it's a pretty big deal that the factory USBs used on each of the outside, those Soundstream radios, where stock USB is being replaced by a built-in USB on the Rockford radio. All 3 radios have the factory antenna connection, so you're just going to plug in your factory antenna for easy installation. Now I want to talk about, we call it the CAN module. This is what communicates with the bike to turn on the radio. Factory Harley radios have a computer area network. We shorten that to CAN, and that signal is what does our thumb controls. Powers our radio on, and even allows us to see things like oil pressure and bike data. It's all done through CAN. And we're going to go a little in depth on this so you understand the difference between each radio. On the Soundstream HDHU14 Plus, they have an external harness that plugs in the back of the radio and uses a CAN control module made by a company called Scosh. That module will turn the radio on and off. It does really well with the security systems, and it does basic thumb controls such as volume up, volume down, track change, source change, those kind of things, the basic things. This is outboard mounted. I think that's a benefit. As much as I like the idea of it being in the radio as far as not having to put it in the fairing, we have plenty of room to put this in our fairing in our installs. But if this ever fails, your radio won't turn on, and I like the idea of being able to unplug it and put a new one on and not having to buy a new radio. Rockford, on the other hand, built the CAN module inside of the radio. So that means there is no external mounted module, and you simply plug in the factory plug. But there's a couple other limitations to that. I do a lot of amplifier upgrades when we replace radios. We do that because no matter which one of these you pick, they're going to do about 50 watts per channel max output, which isn't going to be enough to hear clearly going down the highway. And for significant volume increases, we need an amp. So this harness that also does our thumb controls has all of our speaker wires right here on the harness. So we can simply cut here, go to our inputs and outputs of our amp, and we didn't cut any stock wiring, and you've got a $150 T-harness included with your radio needed for that amp upgrade. We don't have access to any of those wires on the Rockford unit. So we have a CAN module inside, which my worry is that later fails. And now I have to buy a whole new radio. We also don't have access to any of those speaker wires, which means we are going to buy an external amp add-on harness anytime we're going to do an amp with this radio. Or you're going to cut the stock harness, which we're going to say don't do that because that voids the warranty on your bike and it's just not the right way to do it. Also on the back of our radio, both the 14 Plus and 14SI from Soundstream have a camera input. It's kind of cool. You can put a backup camera on the back of your bike. Now you can press a button on the screen and you can see as you're backing in if your fender or the back of your bags are going to hit a curb or so on. So it's cool to have that. And you Tri-Glide owners, you can use it as well, and that's going to allow you when you're in reverse to see what's behind you. So both of these models have the camera input. There is no such thing on the Rockford. There's no camera input on it. There's simply a USB. There's front, rear, and sub RCAs, which are also on both of the Soundstream radios. And then there's an aux input. I will point this out because neither of the Soundstream radios have an analog aux in. I really don't know what you would do with it. I don't have anything that I can think of that we install that still does analog output that you could tie to this, but I'm sure there's something they had in mind, but I just haven't really wrapped my head around why it's there. Other than this is the same output section or same board that's used in some of the other PMX radios, say in the boats that have these inputs. It does have a Sirius XM input, so Sirius XM is only going to be able to be connected to either the Rockford radio or the SI radio. The 14 Plus does not have that input, but you can play Sirius XM through Apple CarPlay or Android Auto in an app. So if you're an Android owner and you've got an Android phone and you want Sirius XM through the app, you can't do it on this radio because it doesn't have Android Auto. Kind of point that out. We have one additional connector here I want to point out. The Rockford radio has something called party mode. I like the idea of it. I don't know about the execution of it quite yet. So this is the antenna for it. This will allow the radio to Bluetooth to another radio up to 100 feet away and a maximum of 8 radios together to play the same song. So imagine you and your friends rolling in to the local bike night and you've all got the same radio playing the same song. I think the idea is pretty cool. The problem is, as we get to pricing, you're going to find out this isn't necessarily the best value per dollar, so you've got to have some friends that also make irresponsible choices on how much they spend on their radio for you to be able to tie things together. That is not in either one of the Soundstream radios. The other thing, I want to point out the amp turn-on wire. Amp turn-on wire, which plugs into your amplifier on both the SI radio or the Plus radio from Soundstream are going to have this factory connector. That's the same connector on the Rockford plug-and-play kits, on so many other kits. All the volunteer audio stage kits are going to come with this amp turn-on wire connector to simply plug it in. They didn't give you that on the Rockford radio. Not really sure why. It looks like they would have, since all of their amps come with it normally. But you will have to cut the connector off your amp and hardwire it to here. I like the idea of having the plug. They don't have that. So let's talk about the CAN module on the 14SI. I hadn't got into that yet. The SI uses a iDataLink Maestro module for its CAN communication, that computer area network, and it's extremely advanced. The guys from iData told us it took them about 8 months to break the CAN code in the Harley to do all the features, which is just a lot of time, and they said that was 6 or 7 engineers. So this is a pretty large feat of engineering that a normal radio company wouldn't try to take on their own. Rockford took on basic CAN function to be able to do the thumb controls and turn the radio on, as well as see distance or trip distance. Maybe they do an update in the future to add more things, but right now, that's as far as it goes. With the CAN communication from iDataLink, we have a lot of added benefits in the SI that the Rockford cannot do. First off, the big one to me, if you have a CVO, you got factory boom audio, boom stage 1 or stage 2 amplifiers, this module will turn them on, keep them in place. It now does correct fade and all the different things that are done through CAN with the factory amps, the SI radio from Soundstream can retain and do. The Rockford radio cannot retain any factory CVO amplifiers. So if you have a CVO or something with a boom amp, you're just going to have to take them out and you're going to have to put new amps in. Also, this Maestro module communicates with the ECM and displays about 60 different custom gauges. So you can go through and select those. It's 2 different gauge screens. We have track pack gauges to do 0 to 60 in quarter-mile times, as well as anything a Harley scan tool can see on those data lines, from your O2 sensor readings to RPM, and everything in between you can display in custom gauges on screen. Kind of like having a set of Dakota digital gauges right on the screen of your radio. I think it's a really cool thing to have. It's a great value. The other awesome thing the Maestro can do is very advanced thumb controls, meaning it can do every function those factory buttons would have done plus some, because every button now is dual function. So if we're in Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, we can actually use those thumb controls and we can scroll across screen and we can select different sources within that. So we can go from our music to our maps and to different music apps for that matter. We can go from playlists to just song titles and so on, pick different artists, all from our thumb controls safely while going down the road. Now, you couldn't do that on Android Auto because it doesn't have it in the Rockford radio. You can do that on the SI. One more step to that is we can customize those thumb controls in the iDataLink Maestro software. So now we can remap any button to do whatever function we want. With Rockford, they've kind of mimicked the factory feel, and we'll talk more about that as we get through here because I think they've tried to copy the factory radio. That can be good and that can be bad because we know you're trying to get away from the factory radio. I have so much more ability with the SI to make the thumb controls work how I want them to and to make them work better, and this module allows that to happen. I think it was a very smart move that Soundstream didn't try to tackle CAN data on their own. You need the best in the business, and that's iDataLink, and that's who they used. Now, that also means if this module ever fails, acts up, doesn't work right, it's as simple as buying another module or having a module warranty exchanged. The radio itself isn't trash. So we want to point that out because I am leery of a built-in CAN module. That is an issue we see in a lot of factory radios, that if that goes out, there's no repairing it, where we can just get a new module on one of these two radios and continue on. So let's go through a few more features that I think are important. We know you like to customize your bike. You love the look of your bike. And with the 14 Plus and the 14Si, we have customizable buttons. The outside buttons can change color. We can pick anything from white, red, orange, green, blue, and so on. Yellow, there's green. We can make it match the theme of your bike. Remember, all Harley factory instrumentation is orange, so you can select it orange if you just want it to match. The Rockford only lights up white, and there's no adjustment in color, so we kind of lost that ability, and I really do like the look of the buttons on the SI. I also want to point out the surround. So Rockford's going to send you two surrounds. One is shaped for a street glide, one for a road glide. Now we know a street glide radio will drop right in a road glide, and that is the correct, or the same one that you see on both of the Soundstream radios. So no need to change the trim rings on these. They drop right in and they fit great. I don't think I like the flat black look of the Rockford trim ring. It's gloss black on the Soundstream models. It matches that gloss look of the screen, and it just flows and looks so good in your interfering. Now imagine you have a gloss black interfering, you got a gloss black screen, and now you have a flat black trim ring. It just doesn't look right in there. So I think they kind of missed the mark on not making this gloss black as well. Maybe later they offer trim rings to do that. Hopefully Rockford listens to us and they update that and they make that better. Now, the last thing on customizing and the look of the radio will be the custom backgrounds. So if you buy the 14 Plus or 14Si from Soundstream, you can download any JPEG image you want to a USB drive, plug it in that stock USB, go into display menu, and load it as your new background. I think that's really cool. We load a Volunteer Audio logo on every radio that we ship out, but that also means if you ride in a riding club or an MC of some sort, you can take your background, your logo for your riding group, and you can put it on your radio. A lot of people do that. I think it looks really cool. Rockford doesn't allow you to do that. You're stuck with the background they put in. I do think their GUI is nice. I don't think they did a bad job of it, but there's no customizing it or changing it. So that's another limitation between it. All right, weather band. I think weather band's kind of something that just aggravates me when there's a storm around because it'll pop up and aggravate you. And with current phones, we have things like weather at our fingertips at any time. And with many of the new navigation apps, we have weather along our route as we go. The Rockford radio does have weather band, and I've got to point out the Soundstream radios do not. So that's one of the few features it gains that the other radios do not do. Let's talk about two more features it will do, the other two won't, because I want to continue on pointing out the differences between the radios. If you have a factory Harley WIM, that is a wireless headset interface module, that's what you would have on your Harley to be able to connect a headset to a stock GTS radio. That is something that's only available at Harley. It's pretty pricey, they're $400+. If you have one of those and it's connected to this radio, you can connect and retain that so that you have headset capability. That is a nice feature that's in this radio that the other two radios don't do. but with some limitations. To get stereo sound, you must have that HD branded Sena headset. That's the only one that does stereo. So if you have a Cardo or standard Sena, you're going to get mono audio sound, and it's not going to sound quite as good. You're also required to buy one of those headsets along with the WIM. That can be $700 or $800 worth of additional parts on top of the cost of the radio to get headset capability. Now, we know there's another manufacturer working on a future radio with headsets that won't have all those limitations. So if headsets are your thing, I would say at this point, wait, hold out. It won't be long. We'll have another option out. Can't tell you about it yet, but it's going to be much better than the way that I've seen this one functions. All right, we talked a little bit about party mode and the ability to hook up to 8 radios to this so that you could connect to your friends. You cannot do that with the other ones because they just don't have party mode capability. And last but not least, CB. When's the last time you used a CB? It's probably been a long time. We do a tremendous amount of installs here at Volunteer Audio. I probably personally do 300, 400 bikes a year, and I rarely see a CB module that's being used or even installed in a Harley. But if you have the CB module, this radio will retain the CB functionality. It doesn't do it with the other two, but I think 99.9% of our customers do not care at this point about CB. So it's kind of it's an option that's there, but I don't know if you'll use it. Warranty, all 3 radios have a 2-year warranty. So all 3 manufacturers say, we'll back this radio for 2 years. We've been selling the Soundstream radios for about 2 years now. And I'll tell you, we've had extremely minimal failure. They're built very, very well. And in the few cases we've had a problem, they've done a great job of standing behind it and taking care of it. No problems, no questions asked. CAN modules being replaceable helps in that case. Maybe we see less failure because sometimes it's as simple as a module we're repairing. Sorry, I've got a lot of information I want to share with you. I've got some notes made. I want to make sure I didn't miss any of those as we went through this. Brightness control, all 3 radios have brightness control, so you can dim the radio or manually brighten the radio. Most of the time, you're going to want the radio as bright as can be. I've had both of these radios powered up next to each other, and a lot of you are going to wonder, is the Rockford radio brighter? It is not. Some of our Road Glide customers have issues with glare on all radios. It's an angle issue of the fairing. The factory GTS radio has a lot of glare, so does the Soundstream radio, and so does the Rockford radio. If anything, it might have looked like it had a little more glare. So I don't want you to think this is the end-all or the solution for you and your Road Glide. Street Glide owners, Electric Glides, Ultras, your fairing is designed where there's no glare really on your radio. It's always easy to see in the sunlight. It did dim a lot. I mean, almost to the point I could cut the screen off, which was seemingly way more dimming ability than I thought we needed. And there is a little sensor on the face of the radio that auto dims. Now, I think I would rather have it just full brightness in daytime instead of waiting on it to slowly bring it up when I'm in a glare situation. So I don't think I'm a huge fan of auto dimming and auto brightness. On both of the Soundstream radios, there's one button on the face, a sun or a moon. If it becomes nighttime, hit the sun, it'll become a moon, it'll dim the screen. Very, very easy to use. We talked about custom gauges only being on the SI radio. We talked about CB and headset only on the Rockford radio. Weather band only being in the Rockford radio. Built-in EQ/DSP. That's a really odd term. Rockford is advertising that there's a built-in digital signal processor. Most of you are going to think of a DSP as 31 bands of EQ adjustment, time alignment, individual high pass and low pass filters on every channel. This has a global EQ. It has front and rear high pass and low pass filters that are independent, but I didn't see any time alignment that you could adjust. So to say there's a DSP involved, I think is not the right terminology that should have been used to talk about the sound stage or the adjustment inside the radio. All of these radios have EQs in them. I want to say, keep watching. I'm fixing to show it to you on a bike. We're going to RTA it. I'm going to go over those EQ adjustments, and I'm going to show you how the EQ works in this radio. And again, I don't think there's enough adjustment there. Let's talk about price, because this is important. We talked about a lot of features. We talked about what we want. I think the best radio, if you're on a budget, you want Apple CarPlay, you want Android Auto, you want those new features in your bike, and you want the great look, the 14 Plus is still coming in at $868.99. That's an awesome price on this radio, and that price is as of August 23rd, 2023, when we're filming this today. Prices are always subject to change from any manufacturer. We see that in life. Things go up more than they come down. The Rockford radio comes in at $1,200. That is the highest price point of our three models, and with the lack of Android Auto capability, not having any kind of built-in nav for those customers, and the ability not to, it doesn't do any of the motorcycle info like the SI does. The SI shows you tire pressure monitors, it shows you voltage, and it shows you things like your EITMS status and oil pressure and all those custom gauges. You don't get any of that with the Rockford radio, yet the Rockford radio is priced higher. As of today, the Soundstream radio, including your module needed to put it in and keep all that, is $1,159.98. $1,159 versus $1,200, it's $40 less, and you gain Android Auto. The only thing that we could say is if it's worth it to you for party mode CB or keeping your wireless headset interface module from Harley working for headsets, then this is the highest price point one, and it does those features. There's no question at this point that those are some standouts that I hope that Soundstream works on adding in future models. I know they're always innovating and coming up with new impressive radios. So let's move to the bike. I'm going to show you this radio working. Now, if you want to see the SI or the 14 Plus, we've done independent full review videos on Volunteer Audio's YouTube channel. Just go back to those. You'll see them on a bike. We'll go over all the features and how they work so you can see all of that. Now we're going to move to the bike. I'm going to show it to you installed. We're going to go through the feature set, through the menus. I do like the graphic user interface. I do think it looks nice. I want to show that to you and then hang out to the end where we actually let you hear it. And I want to show you why Volunteer Audio has chosen not to bring this radio in. So get to the end, to the point where you get to see that part, and it'll all make sense. All right, so I just went over all the features on the table. I want to show you the Rockford radio installed in a Harley. One key thing is we cannot power this radio up without it being in a bike because they integrated the CAN turn-on module into the radio. With the Soundstream radios, I can power them up on bench, I can test them, I can show them, I can do a lot of things that I can't do on a bike, but we've got a Road Glide here. It's very simple to quickly install a radio on a Road Glide. We do have the Road Glide trim bezel mounted to the front of this radio, and you'll see it's kind of a flat black. I do think I would have preferred it to be glossy. The factory ring is gloss black. The Soundstream is gloss black. It looks really good in a gloss. This one kind of, to me, looks a little out of place, but I'm just kind of really used to seeing the other look. So you may like the flat black, but I think the gloss black screen with the gloss black ring looks better. All right, so the fitment of a Harley radio, I want to talk to you about it. In this Road Glide, this radio fits really well currently with everything taken apart. But we find that Harley does not have a perfect seamless fit with any radio. That's going to be whether it be the Rockford radio, the Soundstream radio, or the stock radio. A lot of cases, there's actually a piece of foam, especially on the Street Glide, put in from the factory to kind of hide this gap. You don't pay attention to it before, but as you're installing your radio, you're going to go, oh, there's a gap. Understand, whether it be the Rockford radio, the Soundstream radio, or the stock GTS or GT radio, they're all designed the exact same. They're the same length, the same fitment, and there's no adjustment in mounting, so it mounts in one way. So even though Rockford has included the two different trim rings, we don't see the fitment has changed any as far as those gaps. So you may see a slight gap when you've installed it. That is normal. That's not because Rockford did something wrong. That's not because Soundstream's done something wrong. That's because Harley's fairing is plastic and the fitment isn't super, super tight. All right, so I want to power this radio up. I want to go over through some of the features in it and show you some of the things I like about it. All right, so I do think Rockford did this really cool thing. They did a little video boot screen. It's cool. Doesn't really do much for you later, but it looks cool when you turn your radio on. So I think that's pretty nice. They are going to make you hit every single time. I haven't figured out a way to turn this off. It's going to pop that up every time and tell you that you have to be safe, and I don't think there's any way to get rid of that warning message. Now, I've got a test track in there playing through our USB, so you'll see that that's on screen. Volume goes from 0 to 20, so there's not a ton of volume adjustment, but you do have 20 steps of volume adjustment. Let's go to our home screen here and talk about that. So on your home screen, you're going to see we have our music sources. We also have our bike. If you bring up your bike, the only thing it seems at this point that this radio reads from CAN data that it can display, you know, the SI radio from Soundstream does full custom gauges. The 14 Plus doesn't. The only thing that this one can do so far is show you distance traveled and distance since service. And you have the ability to reset each one of these on screen I don't think there's anything else yet. They may do future updates, but I can tell you that iDataLink Maestro told us it took something like 8 months with 6 engineers to break the code that's being used in the Maestro module on the Soundstream radio. So I wouldn't expect for them to have this really, really soon. So let's back up and let's go back to the screen. So that's what happens when you hit the motorcycle. When you hit sources, you're going to see it has Bluetooth, it has USB, it has AM, FM. It does have weather band. I kind of think weather band is something that I would never use. Some people would use it. But with modern apps, we know what the weather is going to be. And with some of the apps, we have the ability to actually see the weather along our whole route. It does have an aux in. I'm not really sure when you'd use that, but there's an analog RCA aux in at the back of the radio. So if you have something else you want to send audio in from, and I'm not sure what that would be, it does have it. It's Sirius XM capable, meaning if you buy an SXV300 tuner, you can plug that into the back of the radio and you can add Sirius XM, very similar to what the HDHU14SI from Soundstream does. So both have Sirius XM capability. And it has this new mode called Party Mode. Party Mode is interesting. It is going to allow you to basically Bluetooth your radio to your friend's radio. You can hook up to 8 radios together, and they say it has a 100-foot distance. Now that would be a clear distance with nothing interfering or in between. But what that's going to allow you to do is play the same song on up to 8 radios. Now I kind of feel like the cost of this radio is high enough, and the feature set on everything else isn't extremely impressive to me. You're going to have to find other friends that also spent more than they should have on the radio that have Party Mode. And so I don't know how often that's going to be used. I think it's a neat thing to talk about, but I really don't see in real world use this is going to be used often unless everybody goes and buys this Rockford radio, which right now, with some things I'm going to show you, we're going to get into the EQ settings. I'm going to show you some RTA specs soon, and I'm going to explain to you why I don't think that's going to happen very, very quickly until some things get fixed. But from this screen, we have our sources that we can go to. Now let's go to our settings menu. So if you hit the EQ button, it takes you into the settings menu. I hadn't found another way to get in there yet, but here we are. We have fader and balance. So we just have a fader and balance screen. You can scroll this wherever you want to go, or you can recenter it. So let's look at the EQ inside the radio and what adjustment it gives us. So inside of the EQ, they do give you 14 bands of EQ adjustment. So some would say that's one more than the Soundstream radio. But what I'd like to point out is they only give us 3 dB down and 3 dB up of adjustment. A total of 6 decibel, which is not a lot of adjustment. We have 24 decibel of adjustment in the Soundstream Reserve, the HDHU14SI, or the 14 Plus. Now that's not going to mean a whole lot right now, but if you'll continue watching the video, at the end I'm going to hook up an RTA to this radio, and I'm going to show you why that's important and what it actually does. So we'll go through and we'll check out each one of these settings on screen of that RTA, and I'll talk about what it does. But here's what I think they meant to do. So highway, when you're riding down the highway, they're wanting you to get more treble or more high range, and they're going to lower mid bass down to make it hopefully less distorted at loud volumes. In city, which should be your 35, 40, 45 mile an hour range, they're trying to get you more bass. So they're boosting that mid-level range and bringing your treble down. Now in your garage, when you're not riding at all, they want you to have more bass and a whole lot less treble for some reason. So this is their preset EQ for garage. I don't think any of these three are going to make a lot of sense to most riders, and you're going to end up in that custom setting or basic setting, which is where I find that we don't have enough adjustment. And I'll show you that. It's not just my opinion. I'm going to show you on an RTA and show you why that matters. All right, so let's check out the crossovers in the radio and go through what it has offered. So on high pass filter, on front, rear, or subwoofer, we have independent filters. Front filter, we have high pass or low pass. Rear, we have high pass or low pass. If you pick all pass, that just means you're turning it off. I don't know why they didn't just pick off and make it easier. On subwoofer, we just have low pass. So what this is going to allow you to do is to go in on low pass, for instance. We're going to set a frequency, and it's not going to play any high range above that. So we're only sending low bass to our subs. On front, we could do a high pass filter, and what that's going to do is it's going to cut any low range down so that we're not playing bass through 6.5s and trying to blow them up. We do have some frequency adjustment here as well as level adjustment that can be done. We do have a slope that can be changed as well from 12 dB to 24 dB. But I do not see anywhere on here on subwoofer to have a subsonic filter. That'd be really nice to block that low 20 hertz to 30 hertz range that most subs that fit on a Harley aren't going to play anyways. That's kind of missing from here. So basic crossover setup, basic subwoofer control. We have volume from 0 to 20, and we can go from in phase or what they call out of phase. It's just 0 to 180 on your terminals on on your subwoofer. We have automatic volume control. So this is something that, you know, some people want automatic volume. I'm not a huge fan of it because if you have an amplifier that is not clean, or a radio that's not clean to full output, or to volume 20 on this case, and the radio automatically turns itself up to there, you could blow your speakers. And we just like having the control from thumb controls to not automatically turn it up too much. We also, on this particular radio, we don't have a mute capability. Not that's easily done from your thumb controls. I actually would think I would prefer mute versus automatic volume. So as I got to that slower point, so I'm slowing down, I could just simply mute the radio to talk to the passenger or somebody next to me. Or I can just use my thumb controls and turn the radio up or down. It's pretty easy to do that as well. Source level doesn't really do much. It's just going to allow us to go in and turn down anything that we think is too loud, but it doesn't actually boost anything up or make it louder. Now let's talk about intercom capability. So we know this radio will do headset capability. It only does that with a factory Harley WIM installed, as well as if you want stereo sound, you're going to have that HD Cena headset. That's the one you buy at the Harley dealers. There's only a couple that work right with it. And this is going to be where you can actually change the routing from speaker to headset depending on what you're listening to. So let's get into the next settings, because the intercom, as neat as the thought is, we find most bikes do not have a WIM pre-installed. Most people don't own the Harley HD headset, and even the people that do, most of them don't use them often because they find they don't really like talking to their passenger the entire time they're riding around. So with all those things in place, this is neat that it'll do it. I just think there's a lot of limitations. It's requiring you to buy parts from Harley to make this work, as well as headsets from Harley. I know there is another company that has a future radio coming out that won't have these limitations. So I can't tell you who yet, but I'll tell you that it's coming. We also have in here where you would pair a device to your radio. You have your Bluetooth pairing. So some things that I found missing in here: we don't have an ability anywhere in here to do a custom background or change button color. I really like on the Soundstream Reserve HDHU14SI that I can change those colors to match our gauges. Orange is factory color. These are white. It'd be cool if we could go orange or some other color. And the background, so many of you have done the custom backgrounds. I've seen you belong to some sort of riding group, riding club, and you want to put your own logo for your group in the background. I think it looks really cool. You can't do that on this radio. We have basic date and time adjustment. We have brightness adjustment. We have our clock adjustment. Very, very basic information here. This is also where you'd go if you want to see your current software or to do a software update. All right, so let's move on to the RTA. We'll get it hooked up and I'll let you hear what this radio sounds like, or actually see what it sounds like, because it's going to be hard to do that with any speaker and give it a fair shakedown. All right, so I found a few things that concern me. So when we got this radio, let me tell you the story on how we got it. So a lot of you are probably wondering, how did Volunteer Audio end up with a Rockford radio before anybody else? The reason we got it is Rockford sold some of these at the Sturgis Rally. One of the customers called us that bought one of the radios and said, hey, I'm very disappointed in the sound of my Rockford radio. I think I messed up. I should have bought the Soundstream HDHU14SI instead. And they wanted to know if we would work in exchange with them. So I needed one to demo. They were smart enough to know that. And we worked in exchange where they paid a little difference and they got the Soundstream radio, which they then told us sounded much better than this radio. So I wanted to go in and try to figure out why. Why is it that in their case it didn't have any fullness of sound? It didn't sound like they thought it should. They were having a really hard time getting it to sound right. And even with the EQ adjustment in the radio, they felt it was limited and didn't do enough. So I want to show you what we found that I find is very interesting. So I'm got an RTA connected to the output of the front channel of this radio. And I want to show you what some of these settings in this radio are doing. I'm going to bring my volume to where I'm right at the 0 dB line with most of my signal, so you can see the difference as we go through this. We're on the front. We have a high pass filter on. I'm going to start with all pass, so I'm going to turn it off. With it off, I've got a relatively flat signal across the board. It drops a lot above 8K, so they've got something turning the treble down above 8K. If I turn on my high pass filter though, I'm going to show you this. A lot of times people will turn a high pass filter on somewhere around 100 hertz or maybe even 80 hertz. And I want to show you what's happening. If I go to 100 hertz, you'll see our sound starts to drop off at about 400, then 250, here's 160. 100's way down here. That 100 hertz is actually almost 9 decibel lower than that 0 dB mark by turning on this 12 dB slope. Now in reality, it should start there and it should slope down and it should start giving, and we're set at 0 on level here. This level is adjustable, so we can turn this up and down, but it seems like it's just really, really active, like more active than I would think, and it's cutting down a lot of fullness in sound by turning this on at pretty much any one of the frequencies we might pick. 80 hertz is where we get a lot of full range. 100 hertz, 120 hertz, that's where things sound big, they sound full. We know that what makes you smile when you listen to a system is when that bass note hits. And the home audio people and the upgraded car systems, they've all figured out to have a premium system that sounds good, we need something that creates a fullness of sound or some good bass. This radio is pretty well blocking that unless we're in all pass. When we're in all pass, I get some of that low end response, but that means these filters right now are basically useless because if I turn them on at all, they're just blocking way too much bass and we're not going to have a full sound. Now back out of that, we'll go back to all pass and we'll go back to another option that's in this radio. So if we pick a kit selection, like we're on flat tune right now because that should be flat. I want to show you what happens when you pick fairing speakers only. Now this is a little concerning to me. So let's talk about why most people are replacing the radio in a new Harley. There's a few things. We want better features and we don't want to be locked in to having to go back to Harley every time we need to do something like flash our radio to add an amp. Well, the reason we're flashing the radios is because the factory Harley radio output has a crazy bass boost around 80 to 100 hertz. It blows lid speakers, it blows 6.5s, and it's just really not good on your system. When we select fairing speakers only, you'll find out Rockford built in a bass boost in that 80 to 100 hertz range. Now I understand that's the full sounding part of our music. The problem is when you turn it up and that's the only thing boosted, and this is with a flat EQ in the radio by the way. If you went in and raised the bass some, you're going to make this even worse. When you turn the volume up, this is going to start to clip your amp or your output at those frequencies, which are right at where these speakers don't want to play anyways, and you're going to blow speakers repeatedly, like the factory boom audio, factory amplified systems. People get tired of replacing those lid speakers. So I don't think this is really usable, but I've went through and I've tried some of the other ones. If I show that it's got a fairing speakers and bag lids or fairing and tour pack, still yet they keep a bass boost on our front speaker output. Maybe this is the curve they're after, the sound they're after, but from what we know and what we've experienced, if you boost frequencies these speakers don't want to play clearly, all you're going to do is cause distortion, muddiness in sound, and eventually you're going to blow or burn up the voice coil of that speaker. Now, you would have to go to flat tune to get a flat output. Now, we found when we were listening to the flat output, it was very tinny, and if we went to the EQ, we didn't have enough adjustment. But let me show you why I think this EQ needs more adjustment. So let's back out of here. Let's go up to our EQ. So here we are on completely flat, and we're on basic, they call it, just basic treble and bass adjustment. If I turn the treble up, you'll see there's very, very little change in our treble end by doing that adjustment. Not enough to really, to even audibly hear as I was listening to it. If I turn bass up, I make this problem worse. If I turn it down, it doesn't make it much better. So there's very little adjustment. Now we'll go into custom and you'll notice they have 14 bands of equalization. They're trying to have one more than the competition. That sounds good. Maybe you should have more. But as we go in here, even let's say we're going to pick 100 hertz, which is right where I think we're having a problem right now with too much boost. If I turn that all the way down, it didn't change much. It just barely moved. If I turn it all the way up, again, there's not a tremendous amount of increase once it levels out. There's only 3 dB of movement up or down, yet if you'll look at our graph, we've got 9, 10, even 12 dB of issues we're trying to correct in sound. So my problem with this EQ would be it is not sufficient to give you a lot of equalization adjustment. The Soundstream HDHU14SI has 13 bands of EQ, and it has 12 dB up, 12 dB down, a total of 24 decibel of adjustment, which would more than help me correct or create a good EQ curve. I just don't think they can do it with this yet. Rockford, you can probably fix it with an update. Maybe you can, maybe you can't, but I will tell you it may take some time before that update's released. And believe me, this radio is fully up to date. We updated it today. Today is August 23rd. As of August 23rd, I have the latest update in it from the Rockford website. This is very disappointing to me. Along with the higher price and lower feature set compared to some of the competing radios. At Volunteer Audio, we are an independent retailer. I don't work for Rockford Fosgate. I don't work for Soundstream. Neither one has paid me any money. We don't do that. We sell audio to you, and our only concern is that we correctly inform you, that you get the right radio, that you make the right decision, and that you get what you paid for. And in this case, we feel the current Soundstream offerings make more sense. The HDHU14 Plus does almost every feature this radio does outside of the headset capability in the party mode. But it adds Android Auto, which is missing out of this radio. When we get into the SI, we gain what I feel is better thumb controls than this has. We also gain the custom gauges that this radio doesn't have, so we can display all that information. We have Android Auto. We have so many options that are not in this. Better EQ, better filter adjustments, in my opinion, that work better at a lower cost. At the $1,200 price point of this radio, we just feel like they came up short on all the offerings. Yes, this radio will allow you to have a CB. I really never run into anybody with a CB module in the fairing, and I don't know anybody that talks to anybody on their CB. If you're that person, I apologize, but 99.9% of our customers have no desire for CB. Headset capability, yes, it does headsets. Yes, you have to have a WIM from Harley. That's a $400+ part and harness if you don't have it. You also have to buy a Cena headset that's Harley branded to get stereo sound. All these things are limitations that have us stuck back, just like we had the factory radio, and the reason we're replacing our radios to get out of that. We know there is another company working on a better setup than that without those limitations. Can't tell you about it yet. It's coming in the future. So if headsets are your thing, I'd say hold off. There's a better solution coming in the future. So with all that being said, I just want to let you know, we don't work for either company. We can pick either radio to sell. We could sell both if we wanted to. Currently, with the offerings that we see, I don't have to go out and bring this in. We don't need to confuse you with another model because we believe the other ones are a lower cost, more feature, better option currently, and we have 2 years proving the quality of those radios, the longevity, the warranty status, and we know we can better take care of our customers with those other brands. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that we've been informative. I've wanted this to be a clear-cut, true comparison video. I want you to know what features this radio does better, what features it doesn't do as well. That's the point. It's not to badmouth anybody. We don't want to do that. We want to talk about the good points and the bad points. There are some good things. I like the graphic user interface. I like the little boot screen that pops up at the beginning. It is cool if you're the person that already has a WIM and a headset that you can retain those features. Those are cool features. 40% of our customers have Android phones. It does not have Android Auto. I just can't believe some of the things that are missing from it as well. So weighing the pros, weighing the cons, Volunteer Audio is not going to carry this radio. Thank you for watching our review of it and going over it, but we feel like those Soundstream radios are still the better option currently in the market. Rockford, come up with another radio, come up with better features, and we'll re-look at this and revisit it. I do think that it was something that you needed to do. You already built everything else. It's perfect sense to get into the radio world. We understand why you did it. We just wish it did some more things and that the price point was a little lower. Thank you so much for watching Volunteer Audio's YouTube channel. Please like this video. It will help us. It will move it up in search results. More people will see it, and I think that will definitely help us. And I think this information will help other people make the right decision when they buy their radio. Subscribe to our channel for the latest in all things Harley audio. We're going to tell you about new things as they come out, like this radio. We're going to show you how they work, and we're going to show you how to install them. Speaking of which, at volunteeraudio.com, we have the best step-by-step install videos. If you want to know how to install a radio, go there, look up your year and your model, and we'll show you step-by-step how to do it so you can save money installing it yourself. Comment below with any questions, comments, things that you have about it. Now understand, if you start bashing a company, you start cussing, things like that, we're going to remove your comment. Don't take that as us doing something against you, but we run a clean channel, and we're going to make sure it stays that way. If you have a question, let me know. I'll answer it as quick as I can. If you're interested in one of the radios we've talked about and you want to order, call Volunteer Audio at 1-844-30-AUDIO. We'll go over features more in depth with you, make sure you get the right system, the right radio, the right things to meet your budget and for you. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, God bless.